Okay, let's get back underway, and now we're recording, so you'll be able to make use of it later. All right. So, why are you studying this course? To get an insight into the resources that are there in language. What is there in language that enables us to make meaning? Well, that's really the point of what we're trying to look at. Because what is a text? A text is communicating something, it's saying something. It's not a written text necessarily. It covers any use of language, any utterance, spoken language, written language. The idea that we begin with is that there is in language an immense power. There's a power to persuade, there's the power to inform. Now, how do we then take and use those resources in language to be able to be empowered to make meaning? We're interested in looking at a text, and from looking at it, analyzing it, getting a better idea to understand how a text comes to mean what it does. And not just in terms of meaning, the ideas that are being conveyed, but also how well a text comes to mean in the sense of achieving that purpose, maybe to persuade, maybe just simply to inform. The idea being that if you know what are the resources that are being used in language to make meaning, hopefully one can improve on the effectiveness of one's own use of language. If you understand what's at work in language, hopefully your own speaking, your own writing can be more effective in achieving the purpose that you are putting language to work for. All right, now I know that a large concern are what will be involved in the assessment. You can see the breakdown that is here on the screen. Tutorial, in-class exercise. Now this will be, counts 10%. It will be midway through the course, almost like a midterm. In class, you'll be doing an exercise, and on that basis will be assessed. It's sort of a midterm kind of, I won't say test, but exercise. Homework assignments, and this will be work that you'll do outside of class. Now, I indicate there that it will include some group work, and usually that is the case. I'm still thinking, because given the changes that are taking place in terms of being online and so forth, I'm still considering whether to allow some perhaps individual work. I'd be interested in getting some feedback from you as a class in terms of whether you're interested in group work or individual work. What's your response? It does, in a way, I realize the fact that we are coming at each other online. You're not in a classroom, at least not now, and without the opportunity to sort of see others and engage with others and so forth. And so, of course, the circumstances that we're in have made that more difficult. So I'm still considering how I will run and facilitate the homework assignments. So in this case, I'd like you to give me some feedback in terms of what your feelings are about that.
Yeah, I prefer individual work. Strongly
Now,
prefer
major
individual work.
topics to be covered. First of all, making meaning with whatever the grammar will allow. How do we make meaning? That depends a great deal on the wording, and what we're enabled to do through the grammar. The grammar is the resource. We're going to take a look at texts, and we'll take a look at it from, looking at it metaphorically, we'll look at it from the standpoint of the texture of a text, how cohesive it is, the architecture of a text, how it's built, how it's constructed in a way to make it more coherent. We're going to also go, though, beyond the literal to look at how language is used to make meaning in verbal art. For example, poetry. But also, what we're going to discover to realize is that the resources that we use in language that allow for the creativity also allow for that inventiveness that is part of scientific texts. Last, and very important, we'll look at text. We look at text in context. You cannot divorce the text from its use in a particular situation. So these are sort of the major topics that we'll be looking at over the course of the semester. A little bit about myself and my own sort of background and my own thinking that I bring to my teaching of this course. First of all, I come at it from the standpoint of what we call systemic functional linguistics. And we have here at City University of Hong Kong, we have since 2006, the Halliday Center for Intelligent Applications of Language Studies. M.A.K. Halliday, we'll look at who that is in a moment. For now, all I'll just say is that he is a world-renowned scholar in linguistics. Now, this is the only center here at City U, the only center worldwide that bears the name of this globally renowned linguist, M.A.K. Halliday. And the idea is it's basically a research center to promote collaboration with local and other international scholars and working in the area, of course, of linguistics. There's a word that Halliday likes to use. The word is applicable. You'll notice in the title of the center, it's Intelligent Applications. But Halliday says that what he's interested in is what he calls applicable linguistics. Now, why doesn't he just say applied linguistics? I mean, I'm sure you've heard of applied linguistics, right? But usually when you think of applied linguistics, what do you think of? Language teaching, right? Well, in this case, what he's saying is that perhaps the word applicable might be better because we're not limiting ourselves just to linguistics for language teaching. What he says is this: I use applicable. This is Halliday speaking. Because applied linguistics has come to function in some kind of opposition to linguistics, meaning linguistics proper or theoretical linguistics. Whereas I want to reject, he says, that opposition. I want a single concept which unifies the two. I want a general term which gives the sense of something that is capable of having evolved in the context of being applied. What's he mean by this? Meaning that we're not doing some kind of linguistics which is different than linguistics proper. What we're doing is really linguistics. We are applying an insight from working with language and better and improving our understanding of how language works. In other words, by taking our insights that we get from language, applying them, whether it be in teaching or in other aspects, not just in education, but translation and other aspects of the ways we use language, and by applying it, being able to sort of feed back into what is how we improve our understanding of language, linguistics. In other words, how to improve our understanding of language. It's by taking the insights that we get, applying them, and that feeds back into, hopefully, improving and pushing the envelope, so to speak, in terms of what we know and how we use what is language. Now, I want to mention the fact that I think that I hope will impress you to some extent. Yes, that we do have, I mean, this department of linguistics and translation does have a very strong leading role in linguistics, the discipline of linguistics worldwide. We have 2 journals that are the responsibility of the Halliday Center. One of them is Linguistics in the Human Sciences. Now, this journal we began when we began the center. The idea was that linguistics and the human sciences, a dialogue of disciplines, linguistics and other disciplines, the sociology, psychology, and so forth, and learning and being able to apply our knowledge of language in other areas, in wider areas. Another journal that we are now also responsible for is WORD. WORD is the journal of the International Linguistic Association. And in fact, you can see how long has it been published. It's been published since 1945. This is a really old journal, but still active. It began with some of the names of linguists that are really pioneers in linguistics. Roman Jakobson, Andre Martinet, Henry Lee Smith. They began this linguistic circle of New York in the US. And from that came the International Linguistics Association, and out of that has come this journal, and we're responsible for that journal, the editorship of this journal, WORD. Number of publications that I've been involved with, and one of them, as you can see, is a book I co-authored with Halliday, Text Linguistics. Another one, which I'll be also referring to in this semester, is Understanding Verbal Art. I'm also the editor of the collected works, 11 volumes of the works of M.A.K. Halliday. You know, the works of M.A.K. Halliday stretch quite far back. He was writing in the 1950s. In fact, his first journal article appeared in WORD, the journal that we're responsible for. Now, you might say, well, what was written back then, is it still relevant today? Now, that's what's really interesting to me. Because what was written back then and what has been written since still provides insight into how language works. In other words, it hasn't expired, the knowledge that's there. It has continued to develop, but it hasn't meant throwing out some ideas. No, it's meant improving them, developing them. And how has it been developed? by applying it. Applying it in something like text linguistics. Text linguistics is a way really to improve our knowledge of language, but at the same time achieve the purpose of understanding how this text comes to mean what it does. So then, who is M.A.K. Halliday? I'm going to be mentioning him quite a bit, so I might as well introduce you to him. He pioneered the development of what we call systemic functional linguistics. Interestingly, he began as a teacher of Chinese. Yeah, Chinese, not English. A teacher of Chinese. He later became a linguist. He began as a teacher, and he became a linguist. In fact, you know, he studied in China. He did his undergraduate study, Peking University, and later continued at Sun Yat-sen University. Well, of course, at that time, it wasn't called Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou. It was Lingnan University. And he became the founding head of the Department of Linguistics at the University of Sydney. So he has a very interesting biography. And a lot of that experience that he had in China, he brought to his understanding of language. Now, what's another name that you recognize in terms of linguists? You may not have heard of M.A.K. Halliday, but most likely, I think you've probably heard of Noam Chomsky. How are they different? Well, let's first of all take a look at Chomsky. What does Chomsky say about language? Chomsky says that our ability to use language, our linguistic ability, derives from an innate, what's innate mean? Inborn. You're born with it. Innate competence, knowledge. You're born with it. And it's logically well ordered. That's what you've got with language. You've got a linguistic competence. You are born with it. If that's the case, then how come our language isn't always well ordered? How come it's not always so logical? How come it has been so difficult for those working in a Chomskyan kind of linguistics to be able to come up with what this logic is? Why has it been so difficult? Why all these years haven't they been able to arrive at something which works? Well, that's because in language there's quite a lot of fuzziness. There's a lot of indeterminacy. Now, Chomsky would say, okay, that's just the result of things that are irrelevant, performance constraints. You sometimes misspeak. It all is to do with performance, and therefore it's not really very interesting, not really very important. It sort of detracts us from what we're really after, and that is to understand this logically well-ordered, innate linguistic competence. Now, Halliday comes at it from a very different point of view. What he says is this, is that both ideationally, in terms of our ideas, how we construe our experience, how we understand what's going on in the world around us, how we enact social relationships, how we relate to other people through language. Language is inherently fuzzy. It's because we deal with a complex world. It isn't all neat and tidy. And so the way we understand the world the way we interact with others, the result is going to be that language is itself inherently fuzzy. Now, what we're doing with language, what are we doing with language? What we're doing is we're trying to make meaningful choices. What is meaning? Meaning is a choice. You have a choice about how you're going to say something. How do we make those meaningful choices? A text is a choice. A text represents a selection within numerous sets of options. Everything that is said presupposes a background of what might have been said but was not. When we said that language is a resource, it means that there are aspects of it about how we can choose. The choices that we make determine what is meaning. Now, it's not just about the choices that we do make, it's also about what we didn't do. It's what we might have said, but we did not, or how we might have said it, but did not. These are the choices that we're making. So what choices are we talking about? Halliday says this: a text is a semantic structure. It's meaning. It makes meaning, okay? It is formed out of a continuous process of choice among innumerable, you can't count them, but interrelated sets of semantic options. There is an infinity to language, okay? You can't count them. They're not finite. It's not limited. There are innumerable but interrelated sets of semantic options. Now, that total out there of all these infinite sets of options makes what we would call the meaning potential of language. The meaning potential, the total set of all these semantic options, that is the meaning potential. All right, so these semantic options are the meaning potential of language. When I say that we're working with systemic functional linguistics, you notice that I don't say we're working with systematic functional linguistics. Not systematic. Chomsky's view is that language is systematic. It's logical, well-formed. Halliday's view is not the idea of it being systematic, but the idea of it being systemic. What does that mean? What does it mean to say that something is systemic? It is made up of systems of choice. Systems of choice. So think of this. What is meaning? You have a meaning potential, the systems of choice. These sets of semantic options. All right, so Halliday sees language as a systemic resource. Language is a particular kind of semiotic system which is based on grammar, characterized by functional diversity. What's function? Function is the purpose to which you put language. There isn't just one purpose to which you put language. There are more than a single purpose. more than a single function. There's a diversity of functions. Let's take a look at some of what those are. Meaning, construing experience. That's what we usually think of when we think of meaning. How we talk about the world, how we express ideas. So let's call it ideational meaning. We also use language to exchange what? Exchange information, tell people how we see the world, express ourselves. It's not just expressing ourselves for our own sake, it's to make a connection. It's to enact a relationship. This is a purpose to which we put language, and that is interpersonal. But there's a third. Not just how we construe the world and understand what's going on in the world and express it through language, and how we then share that with someone else. How do we turn it into a text? How do we turn it into, whether it's something that we speak or something that we write, how do we take those ideas, how do we take it and make a text out of it? And this is the third, creating the discourse. Textual. We create the discourse. How do we create it? We construe the world, our ideas, we relate to others, but then we also have to put it into something which is concrete, materially there, a text. What do we call these? We call these the meta functions. There's a list that you see on your screen. The heading is what? Meaning, right? And the first one is representational, ideational. Some say representational, some say ideational. Construing experience, how you form what you see and think is going on around you. Now, an aspect of that is the experience, right? The experiential, reflecting on the world around you. But there's another aspect to it. Halliday calls it the logical. Because we take our ideas, we take the what we're wanting to say, and we link it up, one thought after another. And how these all sort of connect, and how we expand on one single idea and expand on it into a text, the logical. Second is interpersonal, enacting social relationships. How we use language to relate to others. How we express attitude, yes, our perspective on things. And finally, how that meaning materializes, the textual. How do we decide where do you begin? How do you start? How does the information flow from one idea to the other? We said we expand on our ideas. Well, what's the flow of information? Some things that I'm going to tell you are things you've heard before. That's old information. And some of the things I'm going to tell you are new information. How do you know what's old, what's new? Do I indicate that? Is there a coherent flow throughout the discourse? How do I signal it? These are the meta functions. Ideational, interpersonal, textual. One time Halliday wrote me a letter. And in the letter, he identified what he considered to be the 7 distinctive features of systemic functional linguistics. Among these features that he identified, these 7 distinctive features, one of them is metafunction. What is metafunction? We said that language has certain purposes for which we use language. And what we're saying is that every language, English, Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, French, whatever, all of these languages have these 3 metafunctions. All languages have to have a way of talking about the world and your experience of the world. All languages have to have a way to relate to others. And all languages have to have a way to create the discourse. Functional. Systemic. Systemic sets of options, choices that you make for how you are going to make language work for you, to make it do the job that you have language, that you want language to accomplish. Well, Halliday describes a language as being, he says, more than a semiotic system. What is a semiotic system? What is a semiotic system? A system of meaning, right? What other semiotic systems are you familiar with? How you wear your hair tells you something. How you dress communicates. You're driving down the street, you see a red light, you know it's to stop. Okay, there are a number of semiotic systems. But Halliday says this language is something beyond that. Something special, something unique. It's a system that makes meanings. So he gives it a name, semogenic. It creates, it makes meanings. How does that happen? It happens by way of what he's referring to is that there are choices that you're making. Choices about how to say something and acting on those choices such that there are some things that you aren't doing in language. So it matters, it means. You're making meaning. There's a book that I like, and especially this quote from it. The author is Stuart Kaufman, and the title of the book was Reinventing the Sacred. He says this: thus, while the human mind central to our human embodied agency is sometimes algorithmic, sometimes computes, it does some things we do not yet understand. It makes meanings. It makes meanings. Yes, we have computational linguistics, natural language processing. And we can say that, yes, you can process language computationally. Some people even have tried language generation. But it never really yet measures up to the human capacity to be able to do things with language that haven't been done before. A certain creativity in language, just the ability to make meanings. So we have meaning on the one side. On the other side, we have wording. How does language, of course you have meaning, but then it must be realized in some way. The realization of meaning comes through wording. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Because on the one hand, yes, we've been talking about choices, and we're saying that the choices that you make meaning. What kind of choices, though, are we talking about? How are those choices realized in language? They're realized through the wording. Think about it this way. When you think about the world around you and reflecting on the world and how you describe it, what's involved? Well, one aspect of it is what kind of process is taking place. What am I doing now? I'm speaking. I'm speaking. That speaking is the process. It's the verb, okay? The verb. Now that's really quite necessary, all right? But besides the process, there is someone who is speaking. I'm speaking. There's someone who initiates it. There's someone who's affected by it. You're listening to it. What are the circumstances? Well, here we're sitting here online in front of our computer, and hopefully you're looking at it, and I hope that the camera and the microphone are all working. Our experience of the world around us is very much related to the representation of the action or the happening. And who are the participants? And what are the circumstances? When we look at logical, how we said we expand on our ideas. Now we expand on it. Some clauses will be dependent clauses. How are the clauses combined? When it comes to the interpersonal, what's my role? I'm the speaker. I'm giving you information. What is your role? To receive it. What's the attitude of the speaker? How am I communicating to you my attitude toward what I'm talking about, my attitude toward you, the listener? How am I organizing the message? Hopefully it's coming across in a coherent way. But how am I structuring it? How am I organizing the text? Because as I'm speaking to you now, that is the text. We live and we act as conscious, communicative human beings in a universe where the realms of matter and non-matter coexist and interconnect. Now, I'm sure that this may come across to you as being a bit abstract. I want you to think about it. We live and we act. We are conscious. We think, we're thinking. We are communicating. That's the kind of beings that we are. We think and we speak. And we do so in the universe around us, where there are sort of two kinds of phenomena. Matter. You can see it. You can feel it. You can touch it. And non-matter. It's invisible. And these two sort of phenomena, these two realms of existence, they coexist, they interconnect with each other. Now, what am I meaning? What am I talking about here? On the one hand, you have matter. Think of it as visible, there. Meaning. Is meaning visible? No. Meaning is really rather invisible. We interpret. We infer meaning. Now, on the one hand, Halliday says it's like it's between these two. It's like a continuum between these two phenomenal realms, matter and meaning. And in the middle, between them is sort of intermediate points between them. It's like there's two opposites, but in the middle it's sort of, it's a continuum, it's a climb. Now hold this thought. We also can see it like this, that meaning and matter, they're like overlapping and they're connected to each other. Now, what we've been looking at here, whether we're looking at it like this, or whether we're looking at it like this, we're really trying to draw a picture of something. And when we're doing it, it's rather metaphorical in a way, because we're trying to sort of understand what's going on. We have meaning. Now, what is matter? On the one hand, meaning can also be thought of in terms of taking place in a context. And the context is the material world in which you are located and in which you are speaking. There are two sort of, we call them strata, all right? There are, you have context on the one hand, you have meaning on the other. Meaning, very much how we interpret what we say or what someone else says to us is based on what's going on around us. What's happening? It's a lecture, okay? And so what's taking place in terms of this lecture, I'm expressing to you about language and text linguistics and so forth. What's happening? What is the topic? What am I talking about? Language, linguistics, text linguistics. We would call that the field. Who is involved? I mean, I'm here, you're there. I'm the teacher, you're the student. We call that the tenor, the relationship. How is it taking place? I'm talking to you. I'm giving you information by means of speaking to you. So think about language. On the one hand, you have meaning, the idea that how you construe the world, and you're expressing that, and you're expressing it, though, it's what's happening. Field. It's who is involved. Well, that will very much relate to then the choices I'm going to make about how I'm going to relate to you through language. You see, the point being that field, the fact that it is a lecture, determines the way I'm speaking to you. The fact that it is a teacher-student relationship is going to affect the choices that I'm going to make about how I communicate with you. How it's taking place in this online Zoom kind of context will also, very different how I'd probably be relating to you if we were in a lecture hall compared to online here. Me in my office here, you somewhere. All of these factors will affect the choices that we are making. It's connected, meaning and matter, context. J.R. Firth was the mentor for Halliday, and he talked about a systemic linguistics with a sociological component. And what he said is systemic in the sense that what we aim to discover are systems of language and culture realized in the dialogic text, in the dialogue, in the exchange, in a specific context of situation. Now that sums up so well what we are on about in text linguistics. We're interested in the systems that are operating in language and culture and how they are realized, systems of choice, remember, in the texts, in the exchanges, in the dialogue, which necessarily takes place in the context of situation. It is a systemic linguistics with a sociological component. That's how I would describe our approach to text linguistics. So we've looked at these concepts, and it's going to be something that whenever we're looking at text, we're going to be coming back to this point. Field, tenor, mode. Field, what is being talked about, related to the experiential metafunction. Tenor, the interrelationships, who is talking to whom, the interpersonal. The mode, the channel by means of which we are communicating. How is the activity taking place? Textual. Do you see how it sort of falls into place? We're going to be interested in what is being talked about, who is talking to whom, how is the activity taking place. And these will all be very significant in terms of the choices then that are made. Now this is what Ruqayya Hassan, Professor Ruqayya Hassan, she is in fact she was the wife of M.A.K. Halliday. She was a linguist, a well-known linguist in her own right. She talked about what she calls this the context metafunction hookup hypothesis. What she's saying is it's bidirectional, works both ways. On the one hand, the speaker's perception of context, how I see the context that I'm in, that is going to activate how I choose to make meaning. On the other hand, how these meaningful choices are realized in speaking contribute to the construal of context. So, in other words, looking at the language, I have an idea about the context, but also the context is what is influencing the choices that I'm making in language. They are interrelated. It's not one way. It's bidirectional. I'm influenced by the context, but my perception of the context is influenced by the language. She says this, meaning word choices activated by context of situation form an instance of some registral variety whose correlate is some specific category of context. In other words, how I'm speaking to you now is activated by the context of situation, which I've described. And this text that you are listening to now is an instance of, she calls it some registral variety. Let's call it a register. It is a variety of language defined by its use. Not by the user, but by the use. So every text is an example of some register. Every register has some contextual correlate, text and context. Eric Steiner is a linguist in Germany who also works within systemic functional linguistics, but he's done a great deal of work on linguistics and translation. In his contribution to this volume, Bloomsbury's Companion to M.A.K. Halliday, in his part, which he dealt with Halliday's contributions to theory of translation, he says this: register in particular becomes a key organizing concept linking context and lexicogrammar. Something which to my knowledge is not found anywhere else in modern linguistics. Register. Yeah, we're going to talk about texts, but we're going to talk about texts in context. Meaning, systems of choice, paradigms of choice. So let's take experiential to begin with. Now, I think, let me see the time. It's about 5 minutes to the hour. I think it's probably time we take a break. Let's take a break, and let's take a 10-minute break and begin at 8:05. And in the meantime, I encourage you, if you have any, I hope that everything is coming across clearly, and if there's any issue, please feel free to raise it in the chat, okay? So we'll take a 10-minute break. See you at 8:05. Okay, everybody, let's get back to work. And I left you with this idea of meaning as systems of choice. So one of the properties of language is that it is paradigmatic. Now, this is a bit different than if you've taken linguistics courses. Most likely, the way you've been looking at language is syntagmatic. Syntagmatic. You're looking at it in terms of sort of the sequencing of words, and looking at grammar from that standpoint. The subject goes at the beginning and where it fits. And so you think of a clause as like a line and with slots, and you fill in the slots in a particular order. But we're looking at it from a different standpoint. We're going to come at it from a different perspective. And that perspective is to look at language as a system of choice. Those choices are paradigmatic, represent a paradigmatic property of language. All right, so let's try to explain what that means. When we look at experiential meaning, and here I'm talking about the reflective experience, how you experience the world around you. You would ask questions like this. What kind of processes are taking place? What kind of? Okay, so it means that the verbs that we use are different kinds of verbs. What kinds are there? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. Who initiates those processes? Who's the doer? Who's affected by that process? What are the circumstances of that process? Now, it sounds so simple, yet we're going to see that it is significant. It is important in terms of how we make meaning. But let's come back first of all, and here's a paradigm. You have a choice between doing, we call them material processes. Describe a doing or a happening. Or a mental process. Sensing, knowing, seeing, feeling. Verbal, saying, behavioral, coughing, sleeping. Existential processes, exists. Relational processes, being, becoming, having. Different types of process, and you can choose whether it's going to be material or mental or verbal or so on and so forth. Now, how do we decide the process type? How do I say that that's doing, that's sensing, that's behaving? Well, of course, you could say on the basis of the meaning, right? It's pretty obvious. Well, not always that obvious, okay? But Halliday's saying that what we should be doing is, though, thinking in grammatical terms, how those processes behave grammatically. Now, this will give you some insight into what he means by grammar, because it's probably not what you usually think of as grammar. I know when I started looking at this, grammar to me was like the proper tense, subject-verb agreement, the plural. Those were aspects of grammar. Halliday has a different perspective, and why I keep saying Halliday is because that perspective is what we are going to bring to looking at texts. I'm hoping that today I can sort of convince you that it is indeed significant the way that we're going to be looking at it. It does give us an insight into how the text comes to mean what it does. Now, again, I mentioned to you at the very outset of today, and that is that I'm going to be covering quite a range of topics today. Am I expecting you to learn all this in the first week? Because I know some of you will drop out. So why am I presenting this? Now, I'm presenting it because I sort of want you to have a feel for the whole idea of what the course is about. And so to do that, I'm sort of giving you an overview, but sort of approach it in a bit of a relaxed way, if you would, all right? Be a bit relaxed today about what I'm covering. And don't be too upset if you feel, wow, it's so much material, I can't keep track of all this. I'll be coming back to many of these topics over the course of the semester. So today, just be a bit relaxed about it, all right? So let me try to sort of convince you my goal is not to convince you to take the course. My goal is to convince you that this way of looking at text does make us have a better idea of how a text comes to mean what it does. That's my purpose. All right, so come back to this point. How do I distinguish process types? Okay, so let's take this one. When I say John kicked the ball, can I say, what did John do? Yes, of course. John kicked the ball. You'd answer it. If I said, what did John do to the ball? How would you answer? He kicked it. Okay, I can ask both of these questions. Can the initiator, I shouldn't say the person, the initiator of this action be non-human? In a doing process, yes, the car hit the tree. The car is not human. A human, yes, is obviously can be John kicked the ball. Now, last one is a bit different. That clause. Can it take a that clause? So what does that mean? That means like, okay, I'll just give you an expression. I thought that he would be coming. I said that he would be coming. But can I say John kicked the ball? No, I cannot. So kick is different than think, and kick is different than say. Because kick is a kind of doing, and it cannot take a that clause. I'm going to tell you a word here. It cannot project. It cannot project another thought, another utterance. All right, so these are sort of three tests that I can conduct to sort of distinguish, in the first case, the material process. You can ask the question, what did X do? You can ask, what did X do to Y? The initiator can be non-human, can be human. It cannot take a that clause, okay? Now, go on to look at mental processes. John saw the bird. What did John do? He saw the bird. No. If I said to you, what did John do? He saw the bird. You're not answering my question. You could say that John watched the bird, John looking at the bird, but not see. See is not, you cannot substitute see by do. And likewise, you can't say, what did John do to the bird? He saw it. That makes no sense whatsoever. Can the initiator be non-human? The clock thinks it is time to leave. No, cannot like that, right? A clock cannot think. So you're saying that it must be human-like. It must have some sense of consciousness. Can it take a that clause? Can it project? Yes, John saw that I was cold. All right, so we've established through these three tests then that material doing processes are very different in terms of how they behave than mental processes. All right, so go on to verbal processes. I hope you're beginning to catch on that the categories that we're defining here are defined by the way they behave grammatically. Yes, they're different in meaning, but think about it. If you said we can distinguish them by meaning, but you can distinguish the verbs down to every verb means something different. All right? So how do we come up with these sort of categories, though? Doing, sensing, saying. What Halliday is saying is grammatically, we see them differently. And at least in the English language, that's true. And he's proving the point here. John told a joke. Can I say, what did John do? Yes, I can say that. But can I say, what did John do to the joke? He told it. No, doesn't sound quite right. No. Can a non-human object communicate? The clock tells me it is time to leave. Yes, that's okay. Can be non-human or human. Can it take a that clause? Yes, John told us that we should leave. All right, so we've distinguished material, mental, verbal, relational. John is smart. What did John do? Well, absolutely not, okay? It can be non-human, it can be human. It can even take a that clause, as long as it's not a human subject. John's view is that all is well. All right, so what we're saying is the paradigm is process type, and these process types are distinguished. We perceive them differently in terms of, and that comes across through how we make them work in the language grammatically. Now, how can I distinguish them? Well, those were the three questions. Can you ask, what did X do? And if there's two participants, what did X do to Y? Must the initiator be human-like, have a sense of consciousness? Can the process project? Can it take a that clause? We could go through the list and we can distinguish each one of these categories, each one of these types of process. So by now you're saying, why? Why bother? Why do we go through this process of looking at material, mental, verbal? What's that going to show us? Okay, I'm going to illustrate it. I'm going to illustrate it with a speech that was given by Donald Jung. Donald Jung gave this speech at the John F. Kennedy, you can see it there, Junior Forum at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Back in 2011. The title of his speech was A Tale of Two Systems. Okay, so you see the text on the screen. Now I've tagged it by P, paragraph, C stands for clause. Again, don't worry about the tagging, all right? Now I'm going to play this bit. And I'm going to argue, after you listen to this, something quite significant was going on. Let's listen to it.
Some of you may know that this year is also an important anniversary for China. It is the 100th anniversary of the revolution that overthrew the Qing dynasty and ended millennium of dynastic rule. 100 years ago today, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the man most closely associated with that event, was making his way back home to China from the United States. He had been here in the US trying to raise funds for the further attempts to revolt in southern China. He was in Denver when the news reached him that the revolution had started without him on the 10th of October in Wuhan, a city in a conservative center of China. At one level, you can read that as a lesson on the need for humility, that those who seek to lead events must accept that often the events leads them. And at another level, it is a reminder of the power of ideas to move men to action well beyond the reach of those who had the ideas.
All right. Now, I was trying to test my earphone to see if I can hear it. I hope I didn't interrupt it in the process. In any case, I hope I didn't switch the slide too quickly. It won't hurt that I can still make the point. What I did with Donald Tsang's speech was this. I broke it up into the categories that I've been talking about. Sensing, being, doing. And so then I list under sensing, know, read, accept, see. Under being, the verb to be, the verb to have. Under the verb do, things related to doing. As I was looking at it, I noticed something, and that was that in just looking at the doing, who is the initiator of the action? I noticed that quite a few of these, the initiator of the action is not a person. It's not people. The revolution overthrew. The revolution started. The event leads. The power of ideas to move. The idea that inspired. A mechanism to establish. Good government creates. Now you begin to see that quite a few of these are not people. They're institutions. They're ideas. They're abstractions. They're not people. And that seems to be really quite predominant in his speaking. But notice something. He says this. Once more we hear the echo of Emerson. This is Donald Tsang. Things are in the saddle and ride mankind. Rather than we feeling that we are the masters of our fate, uncertainty, insecurity, loss of economic hope, widening inequality, these breed loss of trust in the institution of government. That loss of trust gives ground for the grammar of discord to displace the grammar of discourse. It's a beautiful line, sentence at the end especially. That loss of trust gives ground for the grammar of discord to displace the grammar of discourse. It's a beautiful statement, but that's not my main point. My main point here is what he says, what he's saying. What is he saying in this speech? Things are in the saddle and ride mankind. Do you understand that line? Things. Think of it as on a horse. Who's riding that horse? Who's in the driver's seat? All right. Things are in the saddle and ride mankind. We are not the masters of our fate. We are the affected. We are not the ones driving what happens. That is his point. That's the way he thinks. That's his ideology. That is the way he construes the world. And that's what's coming through then in his language. His language is doing, but not the initiators of those doing are largely not people. So not just, he says it explicitly, but at the same time, he's also saying it with almost every sentence, because that's the way he construes the world. And the way he construes the world is coming through in the choices that he is making. Do you see the point? Okay, it maybe contrast it will make it more obvious. And here's a speech that was given by Susan Rice. At the time, she was the representative, the U.S. representative to the United Nations. She went on to become Obama's national security advisor, and she has some leading role under Biden and so forth to come. All right, so anyways, she's giving this speech. This is 2010, Stanford University. It's a commencement speech. A commencement speech, you know, is given to graduates and so forth, sort of motivate them for going forward. I did the same thing with her speech that I did with Donald Jung's. I broke it up into sensing, being, and doing. And I did a bit of counting. All right, so take a moment, look at this table that you see. At the top of it, you see ER role. What's that mean? Who is the doer? Who is the sayer? Who is the sensor? You notice they all end in ER, right? The initiator very often ends with an ER. So I'm going to say that that's the ER role, okay? Another way of saying the initiator. And I'm looking at the initiator in terms of I, first person, herself saying I, you, use of the second person, we, first person, plural, and then everything else I'm going to put in the last column, okay? So I'm just going to distinguish these, but that's already enough. If you see on the side, we have being and doing and sensing and saying. All right, now, how do we read this? Well, first of all, doing. Notice that I, first person, singular, plural, we, and you, make up nearly, let's round it, 80% of the doing is done by I, you, and we. 80%. And half of the speech, 49%, is doing. So largely the speech, half of it is about doing, and 80% of that is being done by people. I, you, we. And even if I take all of these categories, I, you, and we amounts to 70%, whether it's being or doing or sensing or saying. And I, you, and we, well, that's people. People as the initiator of the action.
So much change has transpired just in my adult lifetime, and you will see so much more in yours. But it doesn't just happen. Progress is the product of human agency. Things get better because we make them better. And things go wrong when we get too comfortable, when we fail to take risks or seize opportunities. Never trust that the abstract forces of history will end a war, or that luck will cure a disease, or that prayers alone will save a child. If you want change, you have to make it. If we want progress, we have to drive it.
All right, now, notice what she said. If you want change, you have to make it. If we want progress, we have to drive it. You see, her ideology is very different than Donald Jung's. And my point is this, that ideology, the way they construe the world, that is coming through. It's coming through in the choices that they're making. The choices of who is the initiator of the action. Is it people? Is it things? So language, the choices that we make really do communicate. They really do express how we see the world. And you see, the exciting part of it is that what I've been doing, looking at these process types and who's the initiator, in other words, looking at process, participant, circumstance, that has given me insight into not just the meaning of the text, but the ideology of the person speaking that text. It has really given me a handle on being able to understand not just what's being said, but understand the meaning that is being made. Making meaning involves making meaningful choices. You know, what we're doing is when we're making those meaningful choices, we're making your language as it makes you. Yes. Because the way that we see the world, yes, is how we're going to speak, but how we're going to speak is reinforcing the way we see the world. We're making our language, but it's also making us. All right, now that was the experiential. I hope I've made a point to you that indeed, looking at it from this idea of how we construe the world in terms of process and who are the participants, who's the initiator, who is the affected, circumstances. Yes, that does give us insight into, as I said, not only what the text means, but what is being meant by the person expressing that text. It gives us insight into the way they see the world. All right, now let's move on. Logical. Remember, that was one is the subcomponents of the representational, the ideational, logical. And we said it had to deal with how we sort of expanded our ideas one after the other and how we combine those into the text. Logical. What does it mean, logical? Let me illustrate. John enjoys reading and he likes swimming. Now, I've combined two ideas here. Now, how have I expanded them? I've expanded them, what we would say is paratactically. What that means is symmetrically, balanced. A sequence: 1, John enjoys reading, and 2, he likes swimming. 2 equal ideas, equal, grammatically equal. So there's symmetry here, balance, okay? That's parataxis. This is my father who is teaching here. Asymmetrical. This is my father. That's sort of the main idea, and it's grammatically can stand alone. This is my father. I could say full stop right now. Instead, I go on to elaborate about my father who is teaching here. Now, that who is teaching here, that can't stand alone grammatically. It's dependent on the other. And so we're going to use a bit of notation here. First of all, the main idea, you see, has that sort of vertical line. This is my father. And we'll call it the alpha clause. Again, we'll come back to this. I'm just sort of trying to plant the seed, so to speak, here. Yeah, okay, so you've got some ideas. We will be coming back to. So again, I'm telling you today, be relaxed about this, all right? Who is teaching here? Now that is the dependent clause. And we sort of draw an arc pointing to the main idea. We call it the beta clause. It's a different sort of, it's asymmetrical as opposed to this, which was symmetrical, okay? Now, there's a bit of a further thing to notice here, and that is we usually call this a non-restrictive relative clause. What does that mean? Non-restrictive. Some people call it non-defining. It's a relative clause. We have that relative pronoun there, who. Now, what that means is that this who is teaching here is just further information about that's being said about this is my father, and just some additional information who is teaching here. I'm not defining which father. Most likely I have only one father. So it's not like there's a set of fathers and this is the one who is teaching here. No, that would be restrictive relative clause. Now think of it like this. This is my brother who is studying here. Now if I put a comma after this is my brother, how many brothers do I have? How many brothers? This is my brother, comma, who is studying here. In this case, it still is a non-restrictive relative clause. And how many brothers do I have? One. Not, again, now this, I could have more than one, right? But this is my brother, comma, who is studying here. We do indicate by our punctuation that this is a non-restrictive relative clause. You have two clauses here. Now, if I remove the comma, I really have only one what? This is my brother who is studying here. I really have just one clause. And you might say, what about that who is studying here? Well, that who is studying here is now a restrictive relative clause. And really that is just post-modifying my brother. My brother. Which brother? The brother who is studying here. And so it is now embedded within a noun phrase. The head of it is brother. And the who is studying here is a clause put within as a post-modification of that head noun. It's all one noun phrase. We call it rank shifting because the clause here is no longer functioning like a clause. It is instead being embedded within a noun phrase. It's functioning at the level of phrase, not clause. Sounds complicated, right? Now, all you have to really think of it is like this. We have two clauses, parataxis, symmetrically joined. Each can stand on its own, balance. We have hypotaxis, asymmetry. It's asymmetrical in the sense we can have a main clause and a dependent clause. But we can have also a kind of embedded clause. Lost its sort of clause level functionality and now sort of subsumed under phrase level. All right, now let's again, I'm going to go through this. And again, I will come back to this, but I want you to sort of have, because again, I'm going to try to make a point, all right? And the points what I'm trying to make today is really that all this kind of analysis, there's a reason for it. There's a purpose to it. And the purpose is to give us an idea. These are the resources of language. How you join clauses is a resource, whether it's parataxis or hypotaxis, but at the same time, how they relate. Now, some of these ways in which you can expand in order to elaborate. This is my father who's teaching here. Or you could have it paratactically. There are three components of meaning, colon. They are ideational, interpersonal, textual. You can expand in order to extend an idea. I will leave soon, but you can stay. I could do it hypotactically. He went home instead of going out with his friends. where you have an alpha and a beta clause, and they are hypotactically related. I can expand by enhancing, giving you some information about where, when, why, how. We saw him off the airport, semicolon. Then we returned home. 2 independent clauses, parataxis. When John arrives, I can't stop there. That's a dependent clause. I need something to finish it. We will eat dinner. Hypotaxis. And finally, projecting. Remember projecting? Remember we talked about that related to a that clause? Tom said, comma, and then in quotes, I'll be away next week. That's direct speech, right? You've heard of that. That's parataxis. Indirect speech is Tom said that he'd be away next week. That's hypotaxis. All right, now let's see. Let me try to make sense of this. And I'm going to try to do so with a speech by Obama. This speech was given was very early on. This was before he became president. He was still sort of trying to become the candidate for his party to become president. He was competing with Hillary Clinton, and there was a point at which, at the beginning, he did very well against Hillary Clinton when they were competing for the Democratic nomination. But the next time then, in New Hampshire, he didn't do well. Hillary Clinton won. And he gave this speech. Now, what's interesting about this speech was that it's regarded as one of his best, most eloquent, most passionate, most dynamic speeches. It was even set to music. will.i.am, Black Eyed Peas. Now, some of you may know, some of you, probably most of you don't know. Emmy Award-winning music video. Yes, we can. He turned the speech into music. Okay, now let's listen into this speech and the song. What I'm going to be making a point about is that the reason why it could be set to music is because it has all the elements of what makes for music. It has meter, it has rhythm, it has tempo.
We know the battle ahead will be long, but always remember that no matter what obstacles stand in our way, nothing can stand in the way of the power of millions of voices calling for change. We have been told we cannot do this by a chorus of cynics, and they will only grow louder and more dissonant in the weeks and months to come. We've been asked to pause for a reality check. We've been warned against offering the people of this nation false hope. But in the unlikely story that is America, there has never been anything false about hope. For when we have faced down impossible odds, when we've been told we're not ready, or that we shouldn't try, or that we can't, generations of Americans have responded with a simple creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as struck out the shores, pioneers who pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier,
And the king who took us to the mountaintop and pointed the way to the promised land.
Yes, we can to justice and equality. Yes, we can to opportunity and prosperity. Yes, we can heal this nation. Yes, we can repair this world. Yes, we can. And so tomorrow, as we take the campaign south and west, as we learn that the struggles of the textile workers in Spartanburg are not so different than the plight of the dishwasher in Las Vegas, that the hopes of the little girl who goes to the crumbling school in Dillon are the same as the dreams of the boy who learns on the streets of L.A.
We will remember that there's something happening in America.
That we are not as divided as our politics suggest. That we are one people. That we are one nation. And together we will begin the next great chapter in the American story with 3 words that will ring from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you.
All right, now take a look at this final sentence. Yeah, one sentence. It's a closing sentence. And Obama's texts are pretty typical. The last sentence is rather complicated. But you don't feel that sense of it being complicated. It seems to have a, well, just like as we saw, it could even be put to music. It even has sort of a dynamic quality to it. It seems to build up. What's behind that? Take a look. And so tomorrow, as we take, as we learn, you got a pair there, right? That the struggles, that the hopes, you have another pair there. We will, 47M, and together we will, got a pair there. And then you've got that there is something, that we are not as divided, that we are one people. No, we are one people, we are one nation. You see, you've got pairs and you've got triplets. You got these all sort of put together in a particular logical way. Now look at it. As we learn, as we take, that's rather paratactic. As we learn, that the struggles, that the hopes, you see the balance? All right, now all of that is sort of dependent on what follows. We will remember, we will begin. And what will we remember? That there is something, that we are not as divided, that we are one people, that we are one nation. You see the ways in which it's been combined together. It's not just complicated. It's not complicated. In a way, yeah, it's a complex clause with so many clauses as part of one sentence, but that one sentence has a real pattern to it. A pattern that is based on parataxis, hypotaxis, pairs and triplets. And that's what is behind the rhythm, behind the way in which he is able to put across these ideas together that give it a sense of eloquence. Now, one more. This again is another one of his speeches, and this was when he became president the first time. This was his victory speech, all right? Now, again, it's the last sentence. Last sentence. Again, notice you're going to see it's quite long, quite complicated in terms of number of clauses, but is there a pattern to it like there was in the other?
This is our chance to answer that call. This is our moment. This is our time to put our people back to work and open doors of opportunity for our kids, to restore prosperity and promote the cause of peace, to reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one, that while we breathe, we hope, and where we are met with cynicism and doubt and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.
Notice that his voice gets louder, right? And he begins to speak faster. But it has a beat to it. This is our time. And then you have 3 pairs to put our people back to work and open doors of opportunity for our kids, to restore prosperity and promote the cause of peace, to reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth. A's getting faster, and you got a 1, 2, 3. And then again, 1, 2, 3. Now that comes through what? That comes through the patterning that relates to the logical structuring of how those clauses expand into that one sentence. That is a resource. That is a resource that gives it that quality that we consider to be dynamic and powerful. That's what's at work in the expression of this text. It's a speech, but it is so well crafted. Hypotaxis, parataxis, rank shifting, all of these are factors in looking at how the clauses expand in order to be put to work in not just a coherent text, not just what we can follow, but it gives him a sense of how Obama, as he's presenting it, it gives it that beat, that tempo. Now, again, we have here, though, some rank shifting. Those who tell us that we can't, that would be what we would call rank shifting. It is embedded there. All right, it's 8:53. Again, it's about time for a break. And so let's take a break before we come back, okay? So take about a 10-minute break. It's 8:54. So again, 5 past the hour, all right? I'll see you again. Okay, everyone. Now, please do, I will be, sending you announcements to inform you when something's uploaded or links to the videos and so forth like that, that will be of the lecture, because all of these, I will put the recordings up for you to follow along and so forth. And but please do pay attention to the announcements. And something else that I'd like you to notice on Canvas, and that is I've given you, it's not really an assignment, and I'm not grading it. It's more for me to get to know who is in the class and something of your background, your interest. And so there is an introduce yourself survey. Very easily, it just says, please complete the survey. Now, the survey is in the files, all right? So go to files and you'll see week 1. And in week 1, you'll notice that you have the survey. And it's quite simple. Rate your English language writing ability. Write a brief description about yourself. Introduce yourself to me. Tell me about your language, educational background, life goals, what you like about studying at the university, what you don't like about studying at the university. And I've given you space to do that. Feel free to add to that. I am interested in which linguistic subjects you've taken before, not just at CityU, but elsewhere if you've taken any linguistics. What do you really like in terms of studying linguistics? What are your what are you most interested in? What's your favorite linguistic subject? And what do you hope to learn from taking this course? All right, so that's simple, and I'd like you to complete that. Can you complete that, please, this week so that I can be taking a look and getting to know you a bit better, especially these days when we aren't face-to-face. And so we're sort of meeting each other through Zoom, and very often you guys don't put yourself on video. I understand that, but I don't see you and don't really know who I'm communicating with. This will give me some idea of who is out there, all right, who is part of the class. So please do complete it, and just upload your document in Canvas, and then I'll go through and I'll be taking a look at that. All right, so please do that this week. Interpersonal meaning. How we engage with others, it's not just communicating information. We're not just giving information. We are also relating with each other through language. Now, how can we understand this interpersonal meaning? Well, interpersonal meaning, there's a lot to grasp about it. Let's just take some aspects of it. This isn't the totality at all of what is interpersonal meaning by any means, but it just is, again, we're just really trying to get some handle on understanding what's taking place. Now, think about it like this. This is interesting in English. We do have sort of a way to indicate that whether I'm giving information, I'm making a statement. How do I do so? Well, I typically do so by, it really relates to the subject and the finite, all right? The grammatical subject and the finite verb. If I'm indicating that I'm giving you information, I'm making a statement, the grammatical subject comes first, followed by the finite verb. Finite verb carries primary tense. John bought bread. Okay, so that is giving information. If I'm going to ask a question, though, and I want to receive, I want to be the recipient, I don't want to be the giver, I just switch them around. The finite verb comes first, followed by the subject. Did John buy bread? And if I'm going to be giving you a request and a command, what we usually call the imperative, buy bread, well, there's no finite, no subject there. In other words, this Now, Halliday calls it the mood element. I'm not quite sure why he chose mood, because mood usually, to me, you know, happy mood, sad mood. No, nothing like that. Mood structure refers to, in English, the grammatical subject and the finite verb, and their order or their presence or absence. All right? And that defines for us whether we are giving or receiving. That is relating. Am I expecting you to do something, give me some information, or expecting you to do something for me? So it breaks down into really an exchange, on the one hand, of information, making a statement or a question, or it can be relating to what we usually would think of as business terminology, goods and services. Offering you something, would you like tea or coffee? Or expecting something from you, turn that light off. So these attributes, these ways in which we are sort of relating, that is an aspect of interpersonal meaning. Is that all there is to interpersonal meaning? Of course not. This is one aspect of it. The other would be, for example, communicating the attitude. Am I communicating to you certainty, confidence, or hesitancy? Now, how do I do that? Modality. One way in which we do it, it's how we use modal auxiliary verbs. Now, again, I'm going to play a speech that's given by Obama, and this was when he was president, and this is a speech that he gave to Congress, and he wanted them to do something. He wanted them to pass a particular act. He called it the Jobs Act. Now, this is the text. What we're going to be paying attention to in listening to this now is not the logical structure. No. Not the process, participant, circumstance. No. We're interested in the modality. And notice should. Should. What is should? You should do something. What does that mean? You should pass this right away. It means a sort of an obligation. He's telling Congress, you should do this. Now, who can you tell someone what they're obligated to do? Who can you say you should do this? Well, if you don't do it with the right person, you're going to get in trouble. You have to have a level of authority. You should do this. Now, this is what Obama is saying. But notice what else does he use here? Will. What does that express? Certainty, right? Confidence. Will. Definite. So what is being expressed here is a lot of attitude. Confidence. Communicating that confidence to the other person. Should, indicating obligation.
I am sending this Congress a plan that you should pass right away. It's called the American Jobs Act. There should be nothing controversial about this piece of legislation. Everything in here is the kind of proposal that's been supported by both Democrats and Republicans, including many who sit here tonight. And everything in this bill will be paid for. Everything. The purpose of the American Jobs Act is simple: to put more people back to work and more money in the pockets of those who are working. It will create more jobs for construction workers, more jobs for teachers, more jobs for veterans, and more jobs for long-term unemployed. It will provide It will provide a tax break for companies who hire new workers, and it will cut payroll taxes in half for every working American and every small business. It will provide a jolt to an economy that has stalled and give companies confidence that if they invest and if they hire, there will be customers for their products and services. You should pass this jobs plan right away.
Now, there's clearly more going on than just language, right? You notice the "you should" and that pointed finger, "you should." That gesture, the sternness on his face, you can see it. How stern he looks, the facial the gestures. All of that is part of the meaning. All of that is getting it across, but it's coinciding with, in here, the obvious use of modality to express interpersonal meaning. Textual. Now, yes, I'm today trying to cover all three, and that is what we're doing through the semester. But I'm trying to give you a feel for it, just so you know what you're getting into. All right, if you take the course, if this doesn't sound like what you're interested in, feel free to drop it. This will give you sort of an idea. What do we mean textual meaning? Well, textual meaning, again, we're not covering the totality of what could be meant by textual meaning. We're certain aspects of it, all right? And here, one thing we're talking about is called theme. Now, when I say that word theme, again, you're probably thinking theme, like literature, the motif of the what's being written. No. It has a very specific meaning as we are using it, which comes from systemic functional linguistics. Theme is the starting point of the message. What is a message? A message is a clause. A clause is a message. And here we're looking at, how does the message begin? Message, I don't mean the whole text. I mean the clause. Each clause is a message. And there's a combination, there's an expansion of message after message and so forth. How is the message organized? How does it begin? This relates to theme. The other aspect is information. Is it new information? Is it old information? Is it something I've said before, which you already heard, or is it something you've never heard before? How do I position this information in presenting it to you so you know that I expect you either know this, or I'm telling you I think this is new information for you. What is theme? Again, I want you to sort of put your sort of linguistics on here and think of theme as the starting departure point of the message. It's what typically it's what the speaker wants to talk about. That's what you begin with. It also is important to fit the clause within the context of what you've said before, what you're talking about. Remember, field, we said, is what you're talking about. So it will be related to the context as well. And it also, finally, relates to the method of development of the text. How that text is organized, how you present it, how you put it across in a coherent way. Well, what is theme then? Theme is the initial grammatical element. No, it's not the first word, all right? The boy kicked the ball. The is not theme, all right? The boy is theme. Okay, what is the boy? The boy is the participant. Remember what we said about experience? You experience it in terms of process, participant, circumstance, right? So here, what is the first experiential element? Is it a participant? Is it the process? Is it the circumstance? Focus. What's focus? Now, focus is in English, the English language. Normally, our intonation is like this. When you're giving a statement, as you're talking, we tend to, toward the end of a statement, go up and then come down. There's sort of a peak. We call it a tonic prominence. Tonic, tone, prominence, stands out. Sort of a peak, and then it falls. Where that happens, the speaker is signaling to you new information. All right, so come back, theme. And here I've highlighted it in yellow. John's already left. Yesterday, circumstance. We discussed the financial arrangements. His spirit, participant, they could not kill. People who live in glass houses. Well, that's a rank-shifted clause there, right? Who live in glass houses. That whole thing is the grammatical subject. It's a noun phrase. First experiential element. Is it a process, participant, circumstance? And the new information is what has that tonic prominence. John's already left. Yesterday we discussed the financial arrangements. His spirit they could not kill. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. All right, now theme is, we can make it more complicated, all right, because it is a bit more complicated. If I look at this sentence, but Mary, I do love your cooking. What comes first here? But. Well, what about Mary? What is Mary? Is Mary a participant? Not in this sentence, no. I is the grammatical subject. And I'm the one loving, and what I love is your cooking. But serves what purpose, though? But is, it relates it to what was said before. It's contrast. It's textual. Mary. I'm not talking about Mary. I'm talking to Mary. I'm addressing Mary. That's interpersonal. The first experiential element is I. And so what appears here is really, you see the three metafunctions? The textual, but, Mary, interpersonal, I, experiential, but, textual theme, Mary, interpersonal theme, I, ideational theme. Interesting. At the beginning of that sentence, I'm packaging all three metafunctions. I'm relating to what was said, I'm relating to who I'm talking to, and then I say what I want to say. Again, it does get a bit more complicated because we do have sort of special thematic structures which have a special meaning. It's John I want. What does that mean? Why do I say that? Why don't I say I want John? You know, why do I say it's John I want? Because what I've put first is John. That whole sort of predication is John. That's new information. What do you say? Why do I say it's new information? Well, think about it for a moment. If I say it's John I want, I say that because I'm thinking, you're probably thinking it's someone else. You see, it's not Tom that I want, it's not Bill that I want, it's John I want. I'm telling you, it's new information. And I'm putting it there at the beginning. Identification. Take that second one. What I need is a new car. Why don't I just say, I need a new car? But when I say what I need is a new car, when I create a clause there, basically what I need what? A sort of a nominalization. I package in, I have a I and I need and what? A whole clause there. Put in that like that at the beginning as the grammatical subject. I'm telling you that this and this alone, exclusively what I need is a new car. It's like saying to you, I don't need anything else. I just need a new car. And how do I get that across? I get that across with this kind of thematic structure, a WH clause. What I need is a new car. When I say what the Duke gave my aunt was that teapot, he didn't give her anything else. What the Duke gave my aunt was that teapot. That's it. The verb to be is like an equal sign. Taking that grammatical subject, what I need equals new car. What the Duke gave my aunt was equal sign, that teapot. You see, these constructions have a specific, they have a meaning. There's a reason why I choose to put it this way. Now, when you're looking at a text, though, it's not just one clause, it's one message, it's message after message after message. And so you're choosing theme progressively throughout the text. Now, how do you do so? And what is there a kind of thematic progression? Is there a kind of patterning here? There's three kinds of patterns that we can choose. Linear. Now, typically, how do we begin? We begin typically with information that we already know, old information. Typically, where did we say the focus comes in? Where is the tonic prominence? We said it's largely at the end of the clause, right? Well, that's because what we put at the end of a clause is typically the new information. Typically, old comes at the beginning, new comes at the end. We begin by talking about what the other person likely knows and go on to the new information. All right, no. But what happens in the next clause then, the next sentence? If I end with the new information and then use that new information as a way to begin the next sentence, this is linear thematic progression. How I end the sentence is how I begin the next one. Now that's a kind of information flow. Continuous is that I keep repeating the same thing again and again and again. Derived, and maybe not repeating the same thing, but something related. All right, now, here's an example. This comes from when previously City University of Hong Kong was City Polytechnic of Hong Kong. And there was a book that was made to talk about the anniversary of, at that time, City Polytechnic. And it went back to trace the history. So it begins, what is theme? The genesis of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong. What's the new information? Where's the focus? Lay in the report of a committee. The report of the committee. That's the sort of the new information. And it's elaborated, appointed by the governor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So theme is the genesis, the beginning of the City Polytechnic of Hong Kong. That's what I want to talk about. And the new information is this report. Now notice what the next sentence, how it begins. In its report. That's called linear thematic progression. The new becomes the old. How you end is how you begin. In its report of June 1981, it recommended that there should be a general and substantial increase in the provision of places for a tertiary education. One of the measures recommended for achieving this was the establishment of a second polytechnic. Now, notice 2B, that there should be a general and substantial increase in the provision of places. That was the new information. And 2C, one of the measures recommended for achieving this. What's this? This is, you only can use this because you've already mentioned it. It's reference, it refers back to something that was said. And that is how you begin. That's the linear thematic progression. New, old, new, old. Now, let's take a journal article. This one is interesting. In this particular journal article, notice the first sentence has 2 clauses. Over the past 40 years, species have been extending their ranges toward the poles. What's the new information? Extending their ranges toward the poles. In 1B, populations have been migrating, developing, or reproducing earlier in the spring than previously. New information in 1A, new information in 1B. What happens then in the second sentence? Notice how the new information from 1A, the new information from 1B, all of it is repackaged together here as the subject of the next sentence. The new information you took from one clause and then from another clause, and you took that and combined it into this next sentence. Both of them are combined together. That is linear thematic progression. You see, in English, we listen like this. We read like this. We read with an expectation that how one ends the new information is how it might likely carry over into the next sentence. We listen with that kind of idea. Now, it's not that's not all. You can have continuous, and especially if you're writing a comparison or contrast kind of text, very typically it's a continuous thematic progression. And look at it here. The 2 are the Collins-Cobild English Dictionary, Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. The writer is comparing these 2 dictionaries. Both are 3rd editions. Both have been published in 1995. They are up to date, both. You see what's happening? You keep repeating it. You keep putting it there across to the reader. This is what you are comparing. And the new information is the way that they are being compared. Now, this is important to look at how the text sort of unfolds. In a speech that was given by Malala at the United Nations, as she goes through the text, now I've highlighted here sort of, notice dear friends. Now, dear friends would be a very obvious interpersonal theme, right? The Taliban, they, the terrorists, they. What is that? That's continuous thematic progression. Keep repeating the Taliban, they, the terrorists. Again, paragraph 14, dear sisters and brothers. Again, an interpersonal theme. I, all the way up through into the next paragraph, and then switches from 48 on. This. She uses a lot of continuous thematic progression. And what that does is it gives a continuity, a cohesiveness. You see a sort of a block of text. All these clauses have the same theme, the same starting point. That cohesiveness defines the blocks of text that fit together and cohere to make up the text as a whole. I did a word cloud of her speech, and I noticed that we was used quite a lot, and I was used quite a lot. And that's why in a word cloud, the larger the word, the more frequently that it's used, right? What I did with the word cloud, though, is then just take the top 10 topical themes. Now, topical theme is the ideational theme. And I included the pronouns. And I took the whole speech is about 30 some paragraphs long. And paragraphs 1 through 15. So it was almost halfway, all right? Notice something. Do you see we? No. What you really see stand out is I. Paragraphs 1 through 15. What is it about? It's her first person story, I. Now look at paragraphs 16 through 34. Where's I? I is this little one here. It's not about I, it's about we. It's funny, that speech, it almost halfway, the first half is all about I, the second half almost exactly halfway splits and goes to we. We can see very clearly how that text was put together. The first part is her first person, and then halfway through, she turns it to be not just her own first person, it's the first person plural, we, with her audience. But it stands out so obviously from her choices of theme. The choices of theme really define how that text develops, how it is organized, the coherence of the text. I looked at it, I sort of plotted it, all right? And you can see up through paragraph 16, all about I, and then from paragraph 16 onwards, yeah, there's some mention of I, but largely it's we. All right, here's an example. Yes, I do like Obama, all right? He's an interesting speaker to analyze. His texts are very interesting, all right? So yes, if you aren't interested in Obama, then don't take the course, all right? No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, yes, there will be. I do like to look at speeches, especially Obama is considered to be an eloquent, dynamic speaker. So it's interesting to look at what sort of defines a dynamic speaker. I am interested in sort of the effect that texts have on people, not just the communication of information, but what impact they have, how people respond to it. And that's why this was particularly interesting to me. This was the debate, Obama-Romney. Obama's been president for 4 years already. And he was competing against his Republican opponent, Romney. And this was a debate. They have 3 debates. Now, those 3 debates, the first presidential debate, you can see they're standing at the podium, facing each other. The second debate, it's a town hall format. And in this case, they get up, they talk, and then the other one gets up and talks, and they're responding to questions, not just by the moderator, but by people in the audience. And then the third debate was, again, them matched across each other, but not standing here, they are sitting at a table. All right, so 3 sort of different contexts. The second one we can sort of put away because that one is quite a different context. Town hall is a very different kind of setting. So I'm not going to compare that second one. I'm going to look at the first one. The first one now here, I'm interested in how people responded. Now, when I talk about response, it's not about my subjective. It's not to myself as the linguist, as analyst, I'm not wanting to impose my own sort of subjective feeling about what I'm analyzing. So what I'm interested in is how other people responded. If I say Obama did well, I wanted to look at what others have said that gave me that conclusion. And then I'm interested to see what there was about his language that maybe made that impression. Okay, so here, the first presidential debate. How did Obama do? You can compare the polling. Obama won 22%. Romney won 46%. 25, CNN to 67. Gallup poll, another popular polling in the US, 20 to 72. Who won? Romney won the debate, very obviously. Joe Klein, writing for Time magazine, said it was in fact one of the most inept, it was poor performances I've ever seen by a sitting president. Obama really bombed it, all right? It really, he lost. Now, why did he lose? Is there an answer in his use of language, in the text? All right, let's compare then with the third debate. Obama won 53, Romney 23. Obama won 48-40. Obama won. And people praised Obama's performance in the third debate. No. What was there? You see, this is then where I'm interested in my text linguistics sort of giving me some insight in terms of how they made meaning. In other words, how they produced a response. The response of the audience. Who won? Who lost? All right, now let's take a look at closing statements. I'm just going to focus on the closing statements. And I'm interested in the use of theme. The first debate. There's all the various things that were mentioned at the beginning of the sentences and clauses. There's quite a variety of things mentioned here. Everybody, American, you, there's quite a variety. I is there, yeah. The third debate. I, again, very prominent. But something new here. We. Wasn't there in the first debate, no. But in the third debate, we notice we. So let me take a look at sort of, again, my analysis. First debate. Obama. I, 23%. You, 10%, 3 times. Now, you got to look at it, what was really said. I mean, it's not you in talking about to you, all right? In fact, it's a way Obama uses the language. Whenever he indicates sort of a switch in topic and starts a new sort of topic, he starts, you know. It's a discourse marker. It's not really interpersonal. It's not really directed at you. It's not talking about you, all right? So that, again, you have to pay attention to those things. Other things mentioned, 67%. Now, in the third debate, I, 35%. We, 32%. You, again, the same thing. You know. I think one time was addressing you, meaning the audience. And other things mentioned, 23%. Now, compare Obama's first and third debate performance. What he's saying at the beginning, I, mentioning I, the first person. In the first debate, that's all. And then about a lot of other topics. But in the third debate, we comes to be mentioned. Now, if I take a look at the first debate and I just list them out here, what were the ideational, the topical themes? You can see the reason, the woman, the company, the auto workers, a paycheck, it, they, the question. It's quite diverse. It doesn't really cohere because there's so many different topics that are mentioned here. Not until he gets to the real end of the closing statement, then it's I. But the third debate, notice how I and we throughout that closing statement. The first person, singular, first person, plural. What's he doing? He's making a connection with his audience. He doesn't lose them on sort of a wide range of topics. Rather, he gets the focuses on the connection, the interpersonal connection. And that's what's coming through in theme. In other words, he's strictly sticking to I, we. I want you to notice something else. I want you to take a look at his eyes. At the top, you see his first debate. Does he look at you? The lower, that's the third debate. His eyes never leave you. His eyes are always connected to you. The first debate, no connection. The third debate, he is connected. Language and the way our eyes look, the way our hands, our gestures, all of it's connected, all right? It's all part of the communication. But do you see that the choices of theme make a difference in terms of how you can connect with your audience? It's not just the I and we, it's also the eyes that make a difference. There was something else, though, happening in the first debate. It was, remember, we've seen him have very complicated sentences, right? Very complex. But we noticed that there was a patterning to them. There was a logic to them involving parataxis and pairing and triplets and all that kind of thing that gave it a sort of dynamic quality. But in this first debate, again, he's got one huge sentence. But notice that it's all embedded within embedding within embedding. It's almost impossible to disassemble and understand what he's talking about.
And so the question now is, how do we build on those strengths? And everything that I've tried to do, and everything that I'm now proposing for the next 4 years in terms of improving our education system or developing American energy, or making sure that we're closing loopholes for companies that are shipping jobs overseas and focusing on small business companies that are creating jobs here in the United States, or closing our deficit in a responsible, balanced way that allows us to invest in our future. All those things are designed to make sure that the American people, their genius, their grit, their determination is channeled, and they have an opportunity to succeed. And everybody's getting a fair shot, and everybody's getting a fair share. Everybody's doing a fair share, and everybody's playing by the same rules.
He loses his audience, and his ideas, you can see, it wasn't prepared. He was just speaking spontaneously, and it just was extending, not just extending, it was getting deeper and deeper with embedding. We've come to the end. It's 9:50. I don't want to keep you later than I know you must be tired after a full day, and I'm ready to stop. I hope that you have a feel for what's this course about. We're going to analyze texts. We're going to look at what there is and what has been identified from a systemic functional approach that gives us insight into the choices that are being made that make meaning, the systems of choices. And that is how we're going to be looking at language and being able to hopefully get a better grasp of what's going on and a better appreciation for what makes meaning, and at the same time, hopefully you being able to sort of have a way to improve your own by being more conscious, more aware of how you're using language. Don't forget, please, to do the introduce yourself. Please do that. And hopefully I'll see you next week. All right, so I'll sign off for here. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me on the chat. I'll stay on for a minute or two. All right. Bye-bye.